The day Ethan Cross lost everything, the sky was bleeding. Rain battered the empty mansion he once called home, washing the gold from its walls until only rot remained. And in the silence of his downfall, as he stared at the empty ring box where his soul used to live, he realized something horrifying. He hadn't been betrayed by the world. He had betrayed himself. It started with a smile. Not Claire's smile, the woman who stood beside him when his wallet held nothing but dust and dreams. No. Claire's smile had become ordinary, expected, invisible. The smile that ruined Ethan Cross belonged to a stranger. That night, the rain blurred the glass windows of the rooftop bar, turning the city into a mess of gold and gray. Ethan sat alone, swirling the last of his whiskey, feeling like a man stranded at the top of a mountain he had clawed his way up, only to find it cold, barren, and silent. The bartender knew better than to ask if he wanted another. Ethan's tailored suit, expensive watch, and hollow eyes screamed the same truth. This man had everything, and none of it filled the aching void inside him. Claire had texted him twice that evening. "Claire, made your favorite for dinner. Come home soon? Claire, it's storming. Drive safe. Love you." He didn't answer. He didn't even open the messages. Because across the bar, lounging with a bored elegance that dared the world to entertain her, sat her, long legs crossed, a black silk dress clinging to curves that knew they were being watched. Eyes the color of winter smoke, framed by dark lashes that could pierce a man's better judgment. When their eyes met, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years, alive. She smiled, slow, wicked, like she already owned him. And Ethan, in his loneliness, in his arrogance, in his need to believe he still mattered, smiled back. That was all it took. The beginning of the end was not some grand betrayal. It was one tired man, and one beautiful stranger, and a moment of weakness that he mistook for freedom. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, her voice dripping like warm honey. Ethan, who had once stared down CEOs and kings without blinking, suddenly couldn't remember how to speak. He shook his head. She sat, a perfumed storm cloud settling beside him. Her presence filled the air between them, electric, dangerous. "I'm Lana," she said, clinking her glass against his. "You look like you could use someone to talk to." Ethan laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Is it that obvious?" She shrugged, a lazy, devastating move of her shoulders. "Men like you carry sadness like a second skin." He raised an eyebrow. "Men like me?" She tilted her head, studying him. "The kind who built kingdoms and found them empty." The words cut deeper than they should have. Ethan looked away, swallowing the sudden burn in his throat. "You're wrong," he lied. Lana only smiled, that knowing, merciless smile, and leaned closer. "You're tired," she whispered. "Tired of being needed, tired of carrying everyone, tired of being the good man." Her hand brushed his wrist. A spark shot up his arm. And in that moment, Ethan Cross made a decision that would shatter everything he thought he loved. They talked for hours, about nothing, about everything. Lana laughed at his jokes, leaned in when he spoke, touched his arm when he faltered. She made him feel seen, not as a CEO, not as a provider, not as a husband, but as a man who was still wanted. When the bar closed, Lana stood gracefully and offered her hand. "Come with me," she said. No promises, no consequences, just a look in her eyes that said, "Forget who you are, be mine, just for tonight." Ethan hesitated, just for a heartbeat. He thought of Claire, waiting at home, sitting by the window, worrying because it was storming. He thought of their wedding day, when she wore blue shoes and cried happy tears during their vows. He thought of how she still made him coffee every morning, even when he was too busy to say thank you. He thought of all the things that should have mattered more than the hunger gnawing inside him. And then he let Lana lead him into the night. Hours later, tangled in silk sheets in a hotel room that smelled of lust and rain, Ethan stared at the ceiling and told himself it was a mistake he would bury. Claire would never know. One night didn't have to mean anything. But when Lana curled her body against his and whispered, "I can make you forget everything," Ethan closed his eyes and let her. Back home, Claire sat alone in their kitchen, a cold plate of lasagna untouched before her. The rain tapped softly against the windows. She glanced at her phone again. No reply. She wrapped his plate in foil and put it in the fridge, a small, hopeless act of love, and went upstairs, leaving the porch light on. Just in case. In the dark, far from the woman who had loved him through everything, Ethan Cross began the slow, merciless process of burning his life to ash, and he would only realize it when it was far, far too late. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind was worse. Claire Cross stood by the window, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the last raindrops cling desperately to the glass. The world outside was washed clean, but inside the house the air still felt heavy, as if something sacred had been broken, and she couldn't quite find where the pieces had fallen. Ethan's side of the bed was cold. He had stumbled in around 3 a.m, reeking of whiskey and something else she didn't dare name. He hadn't kissed her goodnight. He hadn't even spoken, just collapsed into bed with a grunt, as if coming home was an obligation, not a desire. Claire pressed her forehead against the cold window pane, closing her eyes against the ache building in her chest. She wanted to believe it was nothing, just work stress, just a bad night. But deep down, in the place where women feel the truth before it's spoken, Claire knew something was unraveling between them, something she might not be able to mend. The next morning, Claire set the table carefully, pouring fresh coffee into Ethan's favorite mug, the chipped navy one he refused to replace, saying it was lucky. She reheated the lasagna he never touched last night, plating it neatly, adding a sprig of parsley, because he used to smile at little details like that. She waited, and waited. When Ethan finally emerged, he didn't even glance at the table. He was already on the phone, barking orders to some poor assistant, his free hand grabbing a travel mug instead of the cup she had poured. "I'll eat later," he said, brushing a quick, distracted kiss against her temple without meeting her eyes. It was automatic. Mechanical. As if kissing her was just another item on a long to-do list he couldn't wait to finish. Claire stood frozen in the kitchen, the plate of lasagna cooling in front of her, her heart cracking open in small, almost soundless ways. She told herself not to cry. Not yet. Maybe later, when the house was empty again. Maybe later, when no one was watching. Days passed. Each one another thread pulled loose from the fabric of their marriage. Ethan came home later and later, offering excuses so thin even he didn't seem to believe them anymore. Meetings ran long, deals needed closing, investors needed hand-holding. Claire smiled and nodded. She packed his overnight bags when he claimed to be traveling for business. She ironed his shirts, tucked love notes into his briefcase like she used to when they were young and struggling, but the notes stayed unread. When she checked his bag days later, the crumpled paper was still there, crushed beneath receipts from expensive restaurants she'd never visited. Restaurants for two. One night, unable to bear the silence any longer, Claire tried to reach him. She put on the red sweater he once said made her look like the sunrise. She cooked his favorite dinner, garlic butter steak, roasted potatoes, fresh bread still warm from the oven. She set the table with candles, turned on the playlist they danced to on their anniversary, and she waited. And waited. The clock crept past 8, 9, 10. The food cooled, the candles burned low. Finally, at almost midnight, Ethan stumbled through the door, tie loosened, eyes glassy. "Sorry," he mumbled, not even looking at her. "Busy day." Claire stood there, the scent of garlic and disappointment thick in the air, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater. "Did you get my texts?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. He shrugged. Phone died. He didn't see the candles. He didn't see the effort. He didn't see her at all. That night, Claire cried in the bathroom with the faucet running so he wouldn't hear. It wasn't one moment that broke her. It was 1,000 little ones. The way he flinched when she touched him. The way he laughed too loudly at text messages she wasn't allowed to see. The way he stopped saying "I love you" without realizing it. The way he looked at her, or rather, didn't look at her, like she was furniture he had grown too used to, too tired of. Claire wasn't stupid. She had seen it happen to other women, heard the whispered stories over coffee dates and book clubs. Men who built empires with their wives, only to trade them in for younger models once the gold was mined. She just never thought it would happen to her. She thought love meant something more. She thought loyalty mattered. She thought Ethan was different. One rainy evening, much like the one where it all began, Claire found herself standing outside Ethan's office building, umbrella trembling in her hands. Through the tall glass windows she saw him, not alone. Lana. Claire didn't know her name yet, but she didn't need to. The way the woman laughed, tossed her hair, leaned too close, it was all so familiar. The same tricks Claire had once used long ago to catch Ethan's eye, She watched, heart cracking with each second, as Ethan smiled back, a smile she hadn't seen directed at her in months. Claire didn't confront him that night. She didn't scream or cry or demand answers. Instead, she turned around and walked back into the rain, letting it soak her to the bone. Because somewhere deep inside, she already knew the man she loved wasn't hers anymore. And maybe, just maybe, he never had been. The first time Claire asked Ethan if something was wrong, she already knew the answer. She found him in his office, the glow of his laptop casting harsh shadows across his face. He barely looked up when she entered, just muttered something about quarterly reports and deadlines and, "Not now, Claire." She stood there, twisting her wedding ring around her finger, gathering the courage that felt heavier every day. "Ethan," she said, voice soft but trembling. "Are you happy?" The question hung in the air between them, sharp and dangerous. Ethan's fingers paused over the keyboard. For a moment Claire thought, prayed, he would look at her, that he would see her, that he would remember everything they had built from scratch, the cold nights, the ramen dinners, the whispered promises to make it, together. Instead, he sighed, that kind of tired, impatient sigh men give when they don't want to have a conversation they already consider over. "I'm fine, Claire," he said, tapping at the keys again. "You're overthinking." Overthinking. The word sliced through her like a blade. How easy it was for him to dismiss her worry, her fear, her grief. Claire swallowed back the lump rising in her throat and nodded, retreating like an unwanted dog shooed from the room. The next morning she found a lipstick stain on his shirt collar, not the soft pink shade she wore. No, this was bold, brazen, scarlet. Claire stared at the mark in the laundry room, the shirt clutched in her trembling hands, her mind spinning through 1,000 explanations. Maybe a coworker hugged him. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe the desperate prayers of a woman trying to stitch herself back together with lies. She washed the shirt 3 times, scrubbing the collar until her fingers ached and the skin split. The stain didn't come out. Some sins, she realized, were meant to linger. Claire tried harder after that. She bought new dresses, ones that clung to her curves like the women she saw in magazines. She spent hours perfecting her hair, her makeup, trying to become the fantasy she thought he wanted. She signed them up for marriage counseling, pretending she didn't see the way Ethan rolled his eyes during the sessions. She laughed too loudly at his jokes. She stopped asking where he was going when he came home late smelling of hotel soap and another woman's perfume. She folded herself smaller and smaller, hoping he would find her lovable again. But Ethan wasn't looking for her anymore. He was chasing a new fantasy, one that didn't involve the woman who had built his empire beside him. One evening, after yet another canceled date night, Claire stood alone in the living room, surrounded by a fortress of memories that now felt like graves. The wedding photos, the framed vacations, the homemade Christmas ornaments Ethan used to laugh at. She walked to the mantel, picked up a photo of their wedding day. She looked so happy, so sure, so in love. Claire traced Ethan's smiling face with her thumb, tears blurring her vision. "I miss you," she whispered to the picture. "I miss us." The only answer was the creak of the house settling, or maybe it was the sound of her heart breaking open a little wider. Late that night, when Ethan finally stumbled home, Claire waited for him in the kitchen, her hands clenched into fists so tight her nails dug into her palms. "Ethan," she said, voice low and shaking, "we need to talk." He dropped his keys on the counter, already weary. "Claire, not tonight. I'm exhausted." "Then when?" she snapped, surprising them both. "When you're done building a life with someone else?" The words hung in the air like a slap. Ethan's jaw tightened. For a second she saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt? Anger? Fear? But it was gone before she could name it. "You're paranoid," he said coldly. "This is why I don't come home anymore. You're always accusing, always clinging." Claire staggered back as if he had struck her. "Clinging?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Is it clinging to want the man I married to still love me?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking at her like she was a stranger he couldn't wait to escape. "I can't do this tonight," he muttered, pushing past her. Claire stood alone in the kitchen, listening to the hollow echo of his footsteps upstairs, feeling the finality settle into her bones. She realized then that she wasn't fighting for their marriage anymore. She was fighting for a memory, for a ghost. And ghosts, no matter how hard you love them, never come back. In the dark that night, Claire packed a small suitcase, just a few essentials, clothes, photo albums, the broken pieces of her heart. She didn't know where she would go yet, but she knew she couldn't stay, because no matter how fiercely she loved him, Ethan Cross was already lost. And maybe he always had been. The house had never sounded so empty. Claire closed the front door behind her with a soft click, her suitcase rolling behind her like a final thread snapping free. She stood for a long moment on the porch, the chill of the night air biting at her skin, waiting, half hoping, that Ethan would come rushing after her. That he would grab her wrist, pull her into his arms, beg her to stay, but no footsteps came. No voice cracked through the darkness calling her name, only silence. Bitter, heavy, permanent. Claire lifted her chin, blinking back the tears that threatened to spill, and stepped off the porch, away from the life she had fought so hard to save, away from the man who hadn't even noticed she was slipping through his fingers. She drove aimlessly for a while, the headlights carving tunnels through the fog, the radio off, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Everywhere she looked, the world moved on. Couples laughing at late-night diners, families piling into SUVs after soccer practice, neon signs blinking promises of warmth and welcome she didn't believe anymore. Claire ended up at her sister's house across town, a modest, cluttered little place that smelled of fresh laundry and burnt coffee. When Emily opened the door, still in her pajamas, her face crumpled at the sight of Claire standing there, soaking wet, her suitcase at her feet, her eyes hollow. Without a word, Emily pulled her into a hug, and Claire finally let herself break, the sobs ripping from her throat, raw and ugly and long overdue. She slept on the pull-out couch that night, wrapped in an old knitted blanket, listening to the steady rain tap against the windows. Somewhere deep inside, a seed of something dangerous stirred. It wasn't anger, not yet. It wasn't hatred, not fully. It was something quieter, more patient. The realization that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to stay broken. Maybe this wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was just the beginning. Meanwhile, back at their house, the house Claire had made a home, Ethan barely noticed her absence at first. He came home late as usual, tossing his jacket over the armchair, muttering about a conference call that ran overtime. When he called out Claire's name, expecting her to appear like a ghost from the kitchen with dinner ready, the silence that answered him felt strange, not alarming, just slightly off, like the TV volume being 2 clicks too low. He wandered through the house, opening doors, checking rooms he hadn't really seen in weeks. Bedroom, empty. Bathroom, empty. Living room, empty. Only when he spotted the missing suitcase, and the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air, did the first sliver of unease thread through his chest. "Claire?" he called again, louder this time. No answer. He checked his phone. No texts. Checked the kitchen counter. No note. Checked the garage. Her car was gone. For the first time in months, Ethan felt something heavier than irritation. He felt fear, but it was a muted, selfish kind of fear. The fear of inconvenience, of discomfort. Not the fear of losing her. Not yet. The first day without Claire, Ethan felt annoyed. He had to make his own coffee, iron his own shirts, figure out how to work the washing machine she always handled. Minor inconveniences, easily dismissed with grumbles and rolled eyes. He told himself she was being dramatic, that she'd cool off and come home when she realized how much she needed him. After all, wasn't that what always happened? The second day without Claire, Ethan felt irritated. The house felt colder without her humming in the kitchen, without the soft clink of dishes being washed, without the gentle background noise of her simply existing. He noticed small things he had taken for granted, the way his favorite cereal magically stayed stocked, the way his suits were always hanging ready by the door. When he tried to microwave leftovers, he burned them so badly the smoke alarm went off. He cursed under his breath, waving a dish towel wildly at the beeping ceiling, and muttered, "Where the hell is Claire when you need her?" The answer echoed back at him. Gone. The third day without Claire, Ethan felt uneasy. Lana texted him a smiley selfie in a lacy dress he didn't recognize. "Miss you already, babe," she wrote. Ethan stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard, a strange hollowness gnawing at his gut. He didn't reply. Instead, he wandered into the bedroom, the one he used to share with Claire, and sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the blank, empty space where her dresser used to stand. He hadn't realized how much room she filled until she wasn't there to fill it anymore. The silence was different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was punishing. Meanwhile, Claire was rediscovering herself. Slowly, painfully, carefully. At Emily's house, she spent long mornings wrapped in sweaters too big for her, drinking coffee that tasted too bitter, scrolling through job listings and apartment ads. Every click felt like tearing another root free from the soil she had been planted in for too long. But with each tear, something stronger grew. Resolve, anger, hope. She started to remember the girl she was before Ethan, the fierce, stubborn dreamer who didn't need a man to validate her worth. The girl who deserved more than broken promises and lipstick-stained shirts. The girl who would rebuild her life, even if she had to do it from scratch. One afternoon, while packing away the last of her things at Emily's insistence, Claire found an old photo tucked inside a book. It was a picture of her and Ethan in college. Young, wild, stupidly in love. They were standing in front of a beat-up car, grinning like idiots, arms wrapped around each other as if the world itself couldn't touch them. Claire traced her younger self's face with a finger, her heart aching. "I miss her," she whispered. Not Ethan, herself. The girl who believed in forever. The girl who believed she was enough. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't let them fall. Not this time. Instead, she placed the photo in a box, taped it shut, and marked it with a black marker. Past. Because that's all Ethan Cross was now. The past. And Claire Cross, the woman rising from the ashes, belonged to the future. It started small. The realization that Claire wasn't coming back. At first, Ethan thought it was pride, a tantrum, a punishment, something that would burn itself out when she got tired of being alone. But the days stretched into a week, the week stretched into 2. And every empty morning, every hollow evening, every cold bed at night whispered the same terrible truth: she was gone. Ethan's house, no, their house, deteriorated into chaos without her. Dishes piled up in the sink. Bill sat unopened on the kitchen counter. Laundry formed mountainous heaps in corners. He kept forgetting to take out the trash. The fridge was nearly empty, except for a few rotting vegetables and a half-eaten pizza box that smelled worse every day. He told himself he didn't care. He told himself he was free now. No more nagging, no more expectations. He could do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. But the truth settled deeper every night. A heavy, suffocating weight pressing down on his chest. Freedom tasted a hell of a lot like loneliness. Meanwhile, Claire was building a new world. A world without him in it. She rented a small, sunlit apartment above a bookstore downtown. Tiny, imperfect, but hers. She bought secondhand furniture, carried it up the narrow stairs with Emily's help, laughing breathlessly when they nearly dropped the couch. She repainted the walls a soft, hopeful blue. She planted a little herb garden on the windowsill. She set up a coffee corner with her favorite mugs. Mugs Ethan used to mock for being clutter. She was building a life from the rubble he left behind. And every nail she hammered, every box she unpacked, every room she made her own, chipped another piece of him out of her heart. One night, Ethan finally cracked. The silence was too much. The memories were too loud. He poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and scrolled through his contacts until he found Claire's name. For a long time, he just stared at it, thumb hovering, heart pounding harder than he cared to admit. Finally, he hit call. 1 ring, 2 rings. "You've reached Claire Cross. Leave a message after the beep." Her voice was calm, sweet, a ghost from a better life. When the beep sounded, Ethan found his mouth dry, his mind blank. He hung up without saying a word. Across town, Claire saw the missed call flashing on her phone. For a moment she froze, her heart leaping into her throat. Her hand hovered over the device, temptation clawing at her, a desperate, aching need to hear his voice, to ask if he missed her, if he regretted everything. But she didn't pick up, she didn't call back. Instead, she turned off the phone, tucked it into a drawer, and returned to painting her new kitchen cabinets white. Each brushstroke whispered a new truth into her soul. You are not his second choice. You are not his fallback plan. You are your own home now. Ethan didn't give up right away. The next day, he sent a text. "Can we talk?" Simple, short, pitiful. Claire read it once, then again. Her fingers itched to respond, to tell him all the things boiling in her chest, But Emily's voice echoed in her mind. You can't heal in the place that hurt you. So Claire pressed her lips together, locked her phone, and went back to living, because replying to Ethan would be like walking back into a burning building, knowing she would be the one left covered in ash again. Back in the empty house, Ethan's world started crumbling at the edges. He couldn't focus at work. His emails piled up unanswered. His employees whispered when they thought he wasn't listening. Even Lana's texts, once thrilling, once an escape, started feeling suffocating, needy, cheap. When can I see you? Miss you, babe. I'm tired of sneaking around. Lana wanted more attention, more commitment, more promises. But Ethan didn't even know who he was without Claire anchoring him. He felt adrift, a man clinging to sinking wreckage, not realizing he had already let go of the only thing worth saving. One night, desperate for something, anything familiar, Ethan drove by Claire's new apartment. He found her sitting at a little cafe table by the window, laughing with Emily, the glow of warm lights making her look softer, freer than he remembered. Claire was wearing a simple dress and no makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. She had never looked more beautiful to him, and never more out of reach. Because she wasn't looking at the door hoping he would walk through it, she wasn't scanning the room for him like she used to at every event, every party, every dinner. She wasn't waiting for him anymore. She was living without him. And she was happier for it. Ethan sat there in his car, fists clenched around the steering wheel, the bitter taste of regret thick on his tongue. He could have had that life. He could have had her. But he threw it away for a woman who didn't even know how to laugh like that. And no matter what he did now, no matter how hard he tried, he could feel it deep in his gut. Claire was slipping further away every day. And someday soon, he would be nothing more than a chapter she closed without looking back. The first real change in Claire wasn't loud. It was subtle. It started in the mornings, when she woke up without dread heavy in her chest, when she brewed her own coffee and drank it slowly by the window, watching the sun climb over the city skyline. When she realized, with a quiet kind of wonder, that no one was waiting to tear her down the moment she smiled. The freedom was terrifying at first. But it was also addictive. She started running again, not to punish her body into thinness like she used to when Ethan's gaze drifted to slimmer women at business parties, but for herself, to feel strong, to feel alive. At first, she could barely make it around the block without gasping for air. But she pushed through. 1 block became 2, 2 became 5, and with every drop of sweat, every ache in her legs, she shed another layer of the woman Ethan had tried to break. She signed up for an evening business course at the community college, something she had dreamed of doing for years, always shelved because we can't afford it, or now's not the right time, or, most hurtfully, why bother? Now, there was no one to ask permission from, no one to belittle her ambitions. Claire walked into that classroom wearing a secondhand blazer and a trembling heart, but she held her head high. She was terrified. But she was free, and that was worth everything. Meanwhile, Ethan was rotting inside his own gilded cage. The house grew darker, dirtier, colder without Claire's touch. The once pristine kitchen reeked of stale beer and takeout containers. Work became a blur of mistakes and missed meetings. He snapped at his employees, fumbled during presentations. The carefully curated image of Ethan Cross, the brilliant, charming businessman, began to crack. Investors grew wary. Partners started distancing themselves. Lana's presence, once thrilling, became irritating. Her endless demands for attention, her jealousy, her shallow conversations grated against his fraying nerves. He started picking fights with her, stupid ones, over nothing. Why are you texting me every hour? Why do you have to be so clingy? You're not Claire, okay? Stop trying to be. The words slipped out before he could stop them, and the moment they did, he saw the rage spark in Lana's eyes, a rage he would come to regret. But for now, Ethan didn't care, because even screaming matches with Lana couldn't fill the yawning void Claire had left behind. Claire didn't notice Ethan's descent, because she was too busy climbing. Slowly but surely, she pieced together a new life. She got a part-time job at a boutique downtown. The pay was terrible, the hours long, but it was hers. She made friends, real ones, who didn't know her as Ethan's wife, didn't pity her, didn't measure her by her relationship. She and Emily had late-night pizza on the floor of her tiny apartment, laughing until their sides hurt. She rewatched all her favorite movies without anyone mocking her choices. She filled her shelves with books Ethan used to call sappy and childish. Every small act of reclaiming herself was a rebellion. Every new step forward was a victory. One evening, after a long shift at the boutique, Claire found a flyer tucked under her windshield wiper. It was for a networking event. Local businesses, entrepreneurs, dreamers. Claire's first instinct was to toss it. The old Claire would have. The old Claire would have thought, who would want to hear what I have to say? But the new Claire, the one forged from pain and loneliness and stubborn hope, folded the flyer carefully and slipped it into her purse. Maybe, just maybe, she was ready to be seen again. That weekend, she walked into the event wearing a navy blue dress she had splurged on. A dress that made her feel powerful and radiant. She introduced herself, shaking hands, exchanging business cards, practicing the bold smile she used to hide behind Ethan's shadow. And when she spoke about her dreams, about maybe opening her own store someday, maybe selling the jewelry she made as a hobby, people listened, really listened, not because of who her husband was, but because of who she was. Back at the house, Ethan stared at the front door long into the night, drinking glass after glass of whiskey, waiting for a sound that would never come. The sound of Claire's keys jingling in the lock, her soft footsteps crossing the floor, her gentle voice saying, "I'm home." But she wasn't coming home. Not to him, not ever again. And deep down, Ethan finally understood he hadn't just lost a wife. He hadn't just lost comfort, or meals, or a clean house. He had lost the one person who made him better. The one person who believed in him when no one else did. And there was no fixing that. No apology good enough. No gift expensive enough. Because love, once betrayed, doesn't shatter all at once. It cracks quietly, 1,000 tiny fractures until the whole thing collapses under its own weight. And Ethan had crushed Claire's love beneath his feet for years. Now, standing in the wreckage, he could only mourn what he had destroyed. Alone. Utterly alone. It started with a single post. Emily had snapped a picture of Claire at the networking event, standing tall in her navy blue dress, laughing with a group of entrepreneurs, radiant under the soft lights. Without asking, she uploaded it to Instagram with a simple caption, "Watch her rise." #ProudFriend Claire didn't even know about it until the likes and comments flooded in. Messages poured into her inbox, old classmates, distant relatives, even strangers, all saying the same thing, "You look amazing. So happy to see you doing so well. You're glowing." For the first time in years, Claire was being seen, not as a wife, not as a background figure, but as herself. And it felt like breathing clean air after drowning. The post caught fire. Soon, local business blogs picked it up. Former Mrs. Cross building her own empire. Claire Cross, from housewife to rising entrepreneur. There were photos of her speaking at panels, sipping coffee at chic cafes, browsing boutiques for her next project. Always smiling, always confident, always moving forward. The city that once knew her as Ethan Cross's wife now knew her as Claire Cross, survivor, creator, inspiration. And Ethan saw it too. Everywhere he went, on his phone, on his computer, whispered in business meetings, Claire's name haunted him like a ghost. But it wasn't the Claire he remembered, not the quiet, patient woman who waited up for him night after night, not the woman who shrank herself to fit into the tight, neat box he demanded. This Claire was electric, magnetic, untouchable. She wore confidence like armor now, a kind he had never gifted her, never thought she would find without him. And it burned him inside out. At first he tried to downplay it. "Good for her," he muttered to a colleague at lunch, forcing a tight smile. "She always wanted attention. Now she has it." But the words rang hollow even to his own ears. Because deep down, Ethan knew the truth. Claire wasn't thriving because she wanted attention. She was thriving because she had finally been set free. From him. Meanwhile, his own life was rotting faster by the day. The cross-company stocks dipped. Minor investors pulled out. Rumors swirled about Ethan's erratic behavior. Missed deadlines, hostile board meetings, public arguments with Lana, who was no longer the fun escape he had traded everything for. Lana, who had grown bitter, clingy, demanding more and more while giving less and less. "You ruined everything for her," Lana hissed during one of their screaming matches. "And you'll ruin it for me too, just wait." She wasn't wrong, but Ethan didn't have the strength to fix it, because the only person who had ever believed he could be better, who had stitched him together with patience and love, was gone, and she wasn't coming back. One night, drunk and angry, Ethan tried to call Claire again. The phone rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. He left a slurred, pathetic message. "Claire, it's me. Just call me back, okay? Please. I miss you." He hung up before he could say more, before he could tell her he hated seeing her succeed without him, before he could admit that every smile she wore now cut him deeper than any insult ever could. Claire listened to the message once. Her fingers hovered over the delete button. For a long time she hesitated. Memories flickered through her mind, good ones, soft ones, broken ones. But she knew better now. Love without respect is poison. Love without loyalty is death. So she hit delete. And then she turned her phone off and went to bed, wrapped not in someone else's promises, but in her own self-worth. The next morning, Claire woke up to an email. It was an invitation to a women's leadership conference, keynote speaker spot, paid, promoted, prestigious. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. If she accepted, she would stand on a stage in front of hundreds, maybe thousands, and tell her story. Not the story of a woman who was betrayed, but the story of a woman who rebuilt herself from the ashes. For a moment, fear clawed at her. What if I'm not good enough? What if they see all the cracks? But then she remembered the woman in the navy blue dress, the woman who chose herself, the woman who didn't shrink anymore. Claire took a deep breath, smiled, and clicked accept. Across town, Ethan sat in his empty house, staring at the same whiskey glass he'd used night after night. Lana was gone, stormed out after their last fight, taking her fake promises and broken dreams with her. The walls seemed to close in around him. The silence was deafening, and through it all, the bitter truth gnawed at him. He wasn't the star of his story anymore. She was becoming everything he told her she could never be, and he was becoming everything she feared he already was. Small, bitter, alone, and he deserved every goddamn second of it. The auditorium buzzed with energy. Hundreds of women, entrepreneurs, CEOs, artists, dreamers, filled the seats, their faces bright with excitement and expectation. Claire stood backstage, her heart pounding like a war drum. She clutched her note cards tightly, though she already knew every word by heart. Out there, beyond the thick velvet curtain, a life she'd only dared to imagine waited for her, a life where she was not a shadow, not an afterthought, not somebody's plus one. Claire Cross was about to tell her story, raw, painful, unfiltered, and this time no one could rewrite it but her. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host's voice rang out, "please welcome our keynote speaker, Claire Cross." The crowd erupted into applause. Claire stepped onto the stage, the spotlight blinding her for a moment. She swallowed hard. She could turn back. She could walk away, slip back into the comfortable shadows. Or she could stand here, even if her voice shook, even if her heart broke open in front of them, and tell the truth. She chose the truth. She took a deep breath and began. "Not long ago, I believed my life was over. I believed that love meant sacrificing yourself, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a hollow shell. I believed that loyalty meant enduring betrayal quietly, and I believed that if I left, if I demanded better, I would be alone forever." She paused. You could hear a pin drop in the room. I was wrong. Leaving didn't break me. It saved me. And loneliness? It taught me the most important lesson of all. I was never truly alone. I had myself, and that was enough. The words ripped through her chest, raw and trembling. But she didn't falter, not now. Claire told them everything. Not naming names, not pointing fingers, but weaving the brutal truths into something beautiful. How she stayed too long in a home that didn't love her back. How she made herself small so someone else could feel big. How she finally walked away, terrified, heartbroken, but alive. And how she rebuilt herself from the ashes, one broken piece at a time. Not perfectly, not easily. But honestly, the crowd rose to their feet when she finished. Tears glistened in the eyes of strangers. Cheers and applause roared through the auditorium. Claire stood there, soaking it in. Not the applause, but the deeper thing underneath. Validation. Respect. Freedom. She had thought once that losing Ethan would destroy her. But standing here, with hundreds of women cheering her name, Claire understood the truth. Losing Ethan had been the beginning, not the end. Across the city, in a crowded bar, Ethan watched the live stream on his phone. He hadn't meant to. He had stumbled across it by accident. Or maybe the universe was punishing him. He sat hunched over his drink, surrounded by strangers who didn't know or care that he was watching his entire failure play out on a tiny screen. Claire's face glowed under the stage lights. Her voice, once so timid around him, rang out clear and commanding, and every word felt like a blade, carving away what little pride he had left. She didn't mention him. She didn't need to. Her triumph, her survival, her light, it was a damning indictment all by itself. Ethan wasn't the storm that broke her. He was just the dark cloud she had outlived. When the speech ended, Ethan sat frozen for a long time, staring at the blank screen. Around him, the world moved on. Laughter, clinking glasses, music, but inside, he felt like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, watching the last piece of solid ground crumble beneath his feet. He had chosen this. He had thrown away gold for fool's silver. He had burned a home to chase a mirage. He had gambled with the one soul who truly loved him, and lost everything. And there was no going back, no redemption arc, no second chance, only the cold, hard truth. Ethan Cross was alone, and Claire Cross was unstoppable. Later that night, Claire sat in a quiet cafe with Emily and a few new friends, still buzzing from the conference. They toasted her success with cheap champagne and chocolate cake, laughing and crying and dreaming about the future. Claire smiled so much her cheeks ached. Somewhere deep in her chest, where the pain had once lived like a parasite, something else bloomed now. Hope, not the fragile, desperate hope she had clung to with Ethan, hoping he would see her, love her, choose her, but a new hope, the kind rooted in herself, the kind no one could take away. Not ever again. And miles away, Ethan stared at his empty reflection in the bar window, clutching his drink like a lifeline. He thought of the woman he had called clingy, overly sensitive, too much, the woman he had cheated on, lied to, discarded like a broken toy. He thought of her standing under those bright lights, telling the world a story where he didn't even matter anymore. And he realized, with a hollow, aching certainty, he had been the weakest part of her life. And without him, she had become magnificent. The offers started coming in within days of the conference. Claire's inbox overflowed, not just with congratulations, but with real, tangible opportunities, consulting contracts, speaking engagements, even a book deal offer from a mid-sized publishing house. "Your story is powerful," the editor wrote. "Women need to hear it. You could change lives." Claire sat at her kitchen table, stunned, reading the email over and over. Once upon a time, she had begged Ethan to read the smallest things she wrote, a blog post, a grant proposal, even a heartfelt letter. He always waved her away. "Babe, that's not real work," he used to say, chuckling, tapping away on his laptop without looking at her. "Focus on what matters." But now, the world was telling her, "You matter. Your voice matters. You matter." Claire didn't just accept the book deal. She negotiated it like a shark. By the time the contract was signed, she had secured full creative control, a sizable advance, and a marketing team that believed in her brand. The publisher wanted to pair the launch with a national tour, book signings, panels, interviews. Claire Cross was no longer a footnote in someone else's story. She was the headline. Meanwhile, Ethan's life unraveled with terrifying speed. The financial press started asking ugly questions. Mismanagement at Cross Enterprises? Whispers of internal conflict at the top? CEO Ethan Cross, visionary or liability? Old board members, the same ones who once toasted him as a genius, now met behind closed doors to discuss removing him. Cross Enterprises' stock price plummeted another 8% overnight, and that was before the leak. An anonymous insider released private emails between Ethan and Lana, scandalous, unprofessional, and dripping with entitlement and rage. Screenshots flooded social media within hours. The headlines followed fast and brutal: CEO's affairs and affairs of business, Ethan Cross under fire, public meltdown of a golden boy. Even news anchors chuckled grimly on live television. Looks like Cross Enterprises forgot that loyalty matters, in business and in life. Ethan tried to fight it, tried to spin it. It's fake, it's exaggerated, it's a smear campaign. But the tide had turned, and no one was coming to save him. Not the mistresses, not the board, not the public, and certainly not Claire. In one humiliating meeting, the board voted to suspend Ethan indefinitely, pending further review. He was escorted out of his own company's headquarters under the wary gaze of employees he used to command. His picture, once displayed proudly in the lobby, was gone by the end of the day. The house he built, the empire he betrayed Claire to build, was crumbling around him, and all he could do was watch. At home that night, Ethan roamed through the ruins of his once glittering life. The mansion he had bought to impress everyone was cold and empty, echoing with memories he wished he could scrub clean. Lana had fled weeks ago, leaving nothing but a cruel note taped to the fridge. "I'm not going down with you. You were never enough for me anyway." How fitting. The woman he threw away everything for had thrown him away too. Ethan stumbled into the living room, dropped onto the couch, and buried his face in his hands. He remembered Claire's hands once, soft and sure, always reaching for him even when he didn't deserve it. He had crushed those hands without thinking. Now no hands reached for him at all. Across the city, Claire stood in front of her new office. It was small, just 2 rooms, a shared kitchen space, but it was hers, painted in soft earth tones, flooded with sunlight, alive with the smell of fresh flowers. Emily had helped her set it up, dragging in furniture, pasting inspirational quotes on the walls. "You're gonna do amazing things here," Emily said, hugging her tight. Claire touched the doorframe, smiling. Not long ago, she had begged Ethan to let her have a little space in his company, a tiny desk, a title, a crumb of validation. "It's better if you stay home," he had said then, dismissive. Business isn't really your thing. Now she had a business of her own, built not on betrayal, but on resilience, on honesty, on hope. Weeks later, Claire's book hit shelves. It sold out on the first day. Reviews poured in, raw, powerful, necessary. Claire Cross writes like a woman who has seen hell and built a ladder out of the ashes, a must-read for anyone who ever doubted their own worth. Claire stood at her first signing event, Sharpie in hand, as woman after woman leaned across the table to whisper, "Thank you. You made me feel seen. You saved me." And with every whispered thank you, Claire stitched a new piece into the quilt of her own healing. She didn't just rebuild herself, she rebuilt others. One night, months later, Claire spotted a headline tucked between business news updates. Ethan Cross declares bankruptcy. Assets frozen pending investigation. Once a titan, now a cautionary tale. She stared at it for a long moment, a strange emotion rising in her chest. Pity, satisfaction, freedom? Maybe a little of all three, but no hate. Hating him would mean she still carried him with her. And Claire had finally learned. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's survival. It's happiness. It's peace. She closed the news app, slipped her phone into her bag, and walked into the sunlit street. Shoulders back, head high, heart light. She didn't look back. Not even once. The coffee shop was almost empty when Claire walked in. It was a small, forgotten place tucked between crumbling brick buildings, a place she used to pass by without noticing. Now, it felt fitting, a neutral ground, a place where the past could be buried for good. She ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, watching the pale gray sky churn with a threat of rain. Her hands were steady, her heart was not. Not because she feared him, but because endings, no matter how necessary, still hurt. The door chimed. She didn't have to look up. She knew. Ethan. He moved differently now, slower, heavier, weighed down by things he could never undo. There was no sharpness in him anymore, no smugness, just a hollow, defeated man wrapped in a suit that didn't fit like it used to. He saw her and paused, as if the sight of her physically struck him. Claire stayed seated, calm, sipping her coffee as if he were nothing more than another stranger. Because he was. Now, he was. Ethan slid into the chair across from her. For a moment neither of them spoke. The silence stretched thick and uncomfortable between them. Finally he cleared his throat. "You look good," he said, voice cracking. Claire tilted her head slightly, studying him. He looked terrible, pale, drawn, older than his years. But it wasn't the weight loss or the hollow cheeks that struck her. It was the eyes of a man who had seen himself clearly for the first time, and hated what he saw. "Thank you," she said simply. She wouldn't offer lies. She wouldn't offer comfort. Not anymore. "I read your book," Ethan said after a long pause. Claire sipped her coffee. "Good." "You didn't use my name," he added, almost confused. "I didn't need to," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You're not the story." Ethan flinched. "Good. Not out of cruelty, but because sometimes pain was the only thing that could crack open the walls people built around their own sins." "I'm sorry," he said, choking on the words. Real tears shimmered in his eyes. "Claire, I am so sorry. For everything. For what I did to you. For what I became. If I could—" "You can't," she interrupted gently. "You can't go back. Neither can I. And honestly, Ethan, I don't want to—" A tear slipped down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. "I lost everything," he whispered. "No," Claire said, setting her cup down carefully. "You lost what you chose to lose. You threw it away with your own hands. I just stopped holding out mine." He nodded, broken. "Do you hate me?" he asked. Claire thought about it, long and slow. The anger, the betrayal, the nights she cried herself hollow, all of it flickered across her mind, but it didn't burn like it used to. It was just smoke now, nothing solid. "No," she said, "I don't hate you. I pity you. And, in a strange way, I thank you." His eyes widened, confused. "Because you ending us," she said, voice trembling with the enormity of it, "forced me to find myself, to save myself, to become someone I love, someone you never really saw." Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't let them fall. Not here, not for him. She stood up, gathering her things. Ethan sat frozen, watching her, as if afraid she might vanish the moment he blinked. "Goodbye, Ethan," Claire said, her voice warm and steady. Not angry, not vengeful, just final, "I hope someday you forgive yourself, because I already have." She turned and walked away, each step lighter than the last. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Outside, the rain had started to fall, soft and cleansing. Claire lifted her face to it, letting the drops kiss her skin. Somewhere deep inside, the last chain snapped and fell away. She was free, free from the old ache, free from the old lies, free to live, to love, to dream without dragging the broken weight of him behind her. Later that night, Claire sat by her window, a glass of wine in hand, the city lights winking below her. Her life was hers now, imperfect, messy, radiant, beautiful. She pressed her hand to her heart and whispered into the quiet, "I made it." And for the first time in years, she truly believed it. The bookstore was nearly empty, a soft jazz playlist humming through the warm afternoon air. Claire had come in to sign a few extra copies of her book, a surprise for the staff. That's when she saw him, tall, reading in the philosophy section, fingers tracing the edge of a worn paperback, like it was something sacred. He looked up, caught her watching. He smiled, not the polished, hungry smile of a man trying to impress, but a warm, startled, real one. "Hi," he said. Claire tilted her head. "Hi yourself?" His name was Marcus, divorced, dad of one, professor of ethics, with a laugh that crinkled his eyes and hands that trembled when he talked about things that mattered. He didn't know her story at first. He just knew she loved black coffee, always cried during animal documentaries, and once sang Bon Iver off-key in the car without realizing it. When he finally did learn her past, he didn't flinch. "You're not your scars," he said softly, "but I'll hold space for them if you ever want to show me." Love came like spring after a brutal winter, slow, surprising, almost shy. Not a rescue, not a redemption. Just two people walking beside each other, hand in hand, with no need to fix or just to share. Claire still woke up alone some mornings and smiled, because even with him there, she never lost herself. She had learned, the best love doesn't complete you. It honors the wholeness you already fought so hard to reclaim. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it and you would love for more, kindly comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.